So please welcome the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Nick Clegg is here. We are here until 6 o'clock, so if you'd like to ask Nick Clegg anything, use the hashtag #LiveLoungeClegg. But before we get into the questions, let's find out a bit more about Nick and his party. Here's Tina with a BBC Three free speech guide.
Before Labour came along, the Liberals were the main opposition to the Conservatives. The modern Liberal Democrats were formed in 1988, when the Liberal Party were joined by some Labour MPs who liked the EU. The party, called the Liberal Democrats, decided on a logo which is apparently the Bird of Liberty. Today, the Lib Dems argue they're at the radical centre of British politics. They're pro-EU, unlike the Conservatives, and say they'll sort out the UK economy faster than Labour. The Lib Dems were the third largest party in Parliament, with 56 MPs. 13% of them were women, 41% went to private school, and all of them were white. Traditionally strongest in South West England, the party has footholds in some university cities, as well as 6 Scottish MPs. Past leaders include Paddy Ashdown and Charles Kennedy, who opposed the Iraq War and quit, revealing he had an alcohol problem. Current leader Nick Clegg used to write for the Financial Times and was a civil servant in the EU. He also speaks Dutch, French, Spanish and German, and English. In 2010, the Lib Dems helped form a coalition government, their first taste of power for a long time. However, their support for the Conservatives and breaking a promise on tuition fees has led to criticism from opponents. Though on the upside, it did give us a new musical star.
Yes, you knew you were going to hear it. Yes, I should have said we welcomed Leanne Wood in Welsh last night. Was there any one of your 5 languages you'd like to be welcome to the Live Lounge in?
No, very happy in English. That's good.
Happy with English. All right, we'll stick with English now. Let's have the first question.
OK, hi, I'm Reese, I'm 23 and I'm from Portsmouth. My question is, all the polls currently suggest that your party is set to do terribly. Is that because you've been living in David Cameron's shadow for so long?
Reese, I don't think we're going to do as badly as the polls. Not nearly. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm not going to try and pretend that it's all been, a walk in the park for us for the last 5 years. It obviously hasn't. It's been, we've had ups and downs. We've had to do some really difficult things, some unpopular things, which we'll no doubt come on to. But I'll tell you why I think we're going to do much better on May the 7th. Because, you see, when you get this, like a snapshot opinion poll, and they ask, I don't know, a few hundred people out of 66 million,
Yep.
Of course, in the areas where we're not, the Lib Dems, not present in people's lives, we're not knocking on people's doors, we're not talking to them on their doorsteps, we're not, in the supermarkets talking to them in community centres and so on. When people don't hear from us, they only hear from our opponents, and people from right and left have been shouting us down for the last five years. And of course, we've been knocked back a bit there. However, in the places, those 56 seats where we have MPs, for instance, or the areas of the country where we're hoping to win constituencies, where we are telling our side of the story day in, day out, that we did some difficult things to sort out the economy. We've given people huge tax cuts, we've increased apprenticeships, we've changed pensions, we've increased childcare, we've introduced equal marriage, a whole bunch of things. When we tell our side of the story, I don't say this to whinge about it, since no one else is going to do it for us, we actually hold on to our support. So my prediction is that all these endless kind of number crunchers have got one thing wrong, which is in the areas where we are able to tell our side of the story, we will do much, much better than our critics suggest.
So the critics would suggest, the polls would suggest you're probably going to lose about 30 seats. How much better than that do you think you're going to do?
I mean, it's just, do you know what? Look, I'm going to make myself. I'm not a pollster. I'm not a pollster. But
you read the polls, and you've looked at the polls and realised there's going to be a coalition. So you know
hang
what
on a
they
minute.
say.
I'll give you a clue about how helpful some of these polls can be. I remember a few weeks ago, there were 2 academics or 2 pollsters who, on the same day, one published an estimate that we would have 0 MPs, and the other one that we would have 48. I mean, it's just like, and these are 2 pointy-headed folk who claim that they know what the future brings. I've been in politics long enough now to know that if you constantly try and jump from one, statistic to the next to try and tell the future, you'll get it wrong. People, do you know what? There are a lot of people, quite rightly, who have not made up their mind how they're going to vote. They're going to make us, again, they're right to do so, really, really sweat till the last minute. It's a very unpredictable election. It's a very fragmented election. A lot is at stake. And I just think a lot of people are going to make up their minds quite late in the day, which is exactly as it should be. I don't think an election should be a slam-dunk result before it's happened. I think there should be some suspense. I think it should be a contest. I don't think it should be a coronation for any party or any MP.
Reece, what do you say?
Well, if you saying about the fact that today that you're willing to go into coalition to any party that comes in.
No, I didn't say that, Reece. Okay, go on.
Well, anyway, what I was going to say was, would you rather be living in Miliband's shadow or Cameron's shadow?
Right.
If you go
You
into
did say you'd go into coalition with either of the two parties that have a realistic chance of going.
First, I've just got
right, isn't it?
Well, Reece is wrong in thinking if of course, and I suggest Reece is probably putting it that way to slightly provoke me, but I don't think being in coalition is being in anyone's shadow. Look, coalition is what it says on the tin, right?
Yeah.
It's the last time, May 2010. You guys, when you voted, if you voted, you guys decided that nobody deserved a majority, right? So us politicians had to respond to your instructions. No one had won, right? So we had a choice as a country, and indeed we had a choice as politicians. We could either just throw stones at each other, right, have no government, and I think if we'd done that, by the way, at a time when we were facing an economic firestorm, we would have been the next domino to fall after Spain, Portugal, Greece. Our banking crisis was much worse than Greece's. Our deficit was almost as bad.
It wasn't really, was it?
Yes, it certainly
our
was.
Deficit. What was our deficit then?
10%, theirs was 11%.
No,
Our banking-
it was 15%. That figure's been revised.
No.
Yeah, the figure's been revised. It was about 15%. And their debt was infinitely higher than ours in Greece.
The banking crisis in this country was much, much worse than any European.
You really think that we would have gone under?
Totally. Totally. Listen, when I came into government, it's amazing you'd think otherwise. When I came into government, I heard one of the scariest things I've ever heard. I was told by some sober-faced official that the liabilities, all the debts and all the kind of rubbish, which had been built up on the bankers' books, on their balance sheets, was 5 times the size of the whole British economy. That's like sitting on a great big powder keg of dynamite. It could just blow up and upturn the whole economy. We were much, much more vulnerable to those shocks if we hadn't sorted ourselves out and created a government, right? Now, of course, it would have been much easier. Of course, it's much easier for me to say, oh, no, you're going to have nothing to do with it. I don't have anything to do with any controversial decisions. I'm not going to compromise. I'm just going to be all terribly pure, keep my hands clean, and just criticise everybody. It'd be much easier for the Lib Dems or for me. But I would not have wanted to have on my conscience mass unemployment, interest rates going up, youth unemployment going through the roof, and all the things which definitely would have happened if we hadn't pulled ourselves back from the brink, which is where we were back in 2010. Anyway, but back to your question, Reece, very quickly. I wouldn't enter into a coalition with, for instance, UKIP or the SNP. I mean, the same way that I'd never put Nigel Farage in charge of Europe. I'd never put the SNP in charge of a country. They want to pull to bits. All I'm saying is, which is just a democratic thing, I'd love to be Prime Minister, but I don't think it's an impending likelihood. So you know, we all know that it's either going to be Ed Miliband or David Cameron going into number 10, right? But we also know, I mean, they'll deny it when they sit here, by the way, but we also know they're not going to win outright. They're not. You can see it in their eyes, by the way. If you look, they know it in their heart of hearts. So actually the big question now is who's going to go in there with them? Not in their shadow, but with them, right? Do you want, for instance, Nigel Farage in there with David Cameron? Do you want Alex Salmond in there with Ed Miliband? I just reckon it's better to have the Lib Dems in there to keep people on the straight and narrow. OK, let's have another question. One in the back row.
Hi, I'm Johnny. I'm from Scotland, where tuition fees are free. What I'm wondering is why you don't think that's a viable option in England as well. Everyone obviously knows about your promise, which was then broken. But in Scotland, it works perfectly well. Interestingly, it's the party that wants to break.
I'm not sure if it does, by the way. But anyway,
well, I mean,
universities don't say that.
A lot of working class students, people I know, have got to university because free tuition fees makes it possible.
Okay.
I'm curious to why you think that wouldn't work in England. Well,
first thing, the big difference, of course, fees existed already. They were introduced by the Labour government in 2003. The Labour government then introduced fees and put them up, right? So I have to deal with the world the way that it is, not the way I might wish it to be. And so when we came into government, fees had been introduced by the previous... I mean, I know Labour now conveniently forgets that. They introduced fees and then jacked them up. And then there was this massive economic crisis, and they left a little note saying there's no money left, right? So we had to save money. So clearly we couldn't put our own policy into practice because Labour had introduced fees and had commissioned this report where they wanted fees. They didn't, never mind 9,000, they wanted no upper limit at all, and the Conservatives wanted them to go up. So clearly I couldn't. I'm not Prime Minister. I lead a party of 8% of MPs in Westminster. In politics, just as in life, you sometimes can't do exactly what you want. Certainly in politics when you haven't won outright. So we did the next best thing. We got the fairest deal we could get. And here's the bit. Forget me for a minute, forget, you know, all the anger and the rest of it. What is the reality? Under the fee system that we inherited, introduced by Labour, if you left university and, let's say, went on a graduate salary of, I don't know, 24,000 quid, right, which is just shy of the average income now, you would pay, under Labour's system, 66 quid a month, right, for doing that. Under the system we've introduced now, you pay £22 a month. You pay a third. And I would suggest that whilst I'm not ducking the controversy, actually the reason why more disadvantaged kids are going to university than ever before, the reason why more young people are at university on full-time courses than ever before, is that people have worked out, thankfully, that what we've actually introduced is, in effect, a fair graduate tax. I wish we'd called it that, by the way. It would have saved me a lot of heart attack. Heart attack. There's a slightly revealing slip-up. A lot of heartache, because what it basically means is, under the old system with Labour, if you earned 15,000 having graduated, you had to start paying back your fees. Under the new system, you don't pay anything back at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You only start paying back at 21. And then you only pay back what you can. And that's why, actually, despite the fact that the sort of ticket price has gone up, the reality is that graduates in the future will pay less. All graduates will pay less out of their bank accounts every week and every month than they did. And that is the reason, by the way, why disadvantaged students south of the border are increasing in number in going to the universities. So look, of course I would have loved to do exactly what I want, but I think we've done the next fairest thing, and it's working much better than your characterisation would suggest.
But surely it's about priorities, because in Scotland we see it as a right, not just a privilege. And for us, it's like the SNP, the party you say wants to break up the UK and ruin it.
Well, do they or do they not?
Like, no, they want to. I mean, I'm not a hardcore SNP voter, but I think I might vote for them this election.
But is it a fact or not they want to take the UK apart? They want to pull...
Yeah, but I don't think it's in Scotland's interests to ruin the UK. I think it would be very naive to think that they're going to do that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the SNP, as the Scottish Government, free tuition fees have worked very, very well. More people are going to university from poorer backgrounds, and that's a fact, and that's under that policy. No, and it's surely prioritising spending, because you're saying you can't afford it in England, but you can afford £100 billion on nuclear weapons of mass destruction.
We're not spending £100 billion, and that's a nonsense. But listen, let me try and explain. Firstly, if you listen to Scottish universities, they won't tell you it's working well at all. They say it's unsustainable, it financially does not work. Secondly, as I say, there are now more young people in full-time courses in English universities than ever before, more kids from black minority ethnic backgrounds than ever before, more poorer kids than ever before. That must be for a reason. It can't just be, I'm not inventing that. And the reason is that, in fact, they're paying less than they were. And by the way, here's a huge difference. Under the system introduced, not by me, but by the previous Labour government, thousands of students on part-time courses had to pay up front, or they had to ask their mum and dad to pay for them. We've ended that. You don't need to pay anything up front. You only have to pay back years after you've left university, and if you can afford to do so. And by the way, you talk about priorities. And do you know what? OK, actually, hang on. Why don't I concede? We could have said, you know what? We're not going to save the £2 billion on that. We'll take it from pensioners. We'll take it from little kids at primary school. We'll take it from the school system. Actually, I think what we have done is we've made sure that universities are on a sustainable footing and that everybody can afford to go to university. There is no discouragement for anybody to go to university, and more youngsters are going to university. And then we've put more money, not less, more money into childcare for 2-year-olds, childcare for 3-year-olds, childcare for 4-year-olds. We've introduced the £2.5 billion pupil premium, something I came up with, which is more money to help disadvantaged kids at school. Final note on this. If you want kids to even dream of going to university, the most important thing you can do for them, and I know this is a dad, and every teacher listening or watching to this knows this as well, help kids when they're small, even before they've hung up their coat on the first day at primary school. And that's exactly where we've invested money over the last 5 years.
It's very odd to hear you thumping the tub quite so loudly for these increased tuition fees. Are you sorry you said sorry?
No, I said sorry for the fact that we should not have said that we could do something, which clearly we couldn't.
Because we gave you a heart attack, apparently.
Well, a heartache was what I actually meant. But no, what I'm sort of forcefully sort of responding to is a characterisation of the system or the history of this, which is just simply not the case. And look, at the end of the day, forget me and the politics of all of this. What I really care about is that youngsters get the best possible education they can get, and that anyone can go to university. And I feel with every fibre of my being that in the circumstances we found, when there was no money left and I hadn't won the election, we did the best thing we possibly could, which was put more or less money into the school system and primary schools and early years, and make sure that anyone can go to university without facing any upfront fees which stops them from doing so. Those are the facts. Now, we can disagree or agree about them, but those at least is a fair description of the facts.
All right. Remember, you can watch us online right now, and let's get another question from the live lounge here.
Hi, I'm Danny. I'm 21, and I'm from Yorkshire. I'm launching...
Where in Yorkshire?
Harrogate, just near Leeds.
All right.
North Yorkshire. I'm launching...
Not the beautiful southern bit called Chef.
Harrogate's beautiful.
Yeah, no, it is very beautiful. Very beautiful, of course. Yeah.
I'm launching an internet business called Chef Database next week. I've had positive support from this government in terms of government schemes. Will you continue to support young businesses and encourage young people to start businesses?